Most bass anglers know or have heard of that jerkbaits are one of the most popular lures for catching bass in the wintertime. Well, there's a few little tips and tricks that you can do that really tips the balance in your favor. Hi there, welcome to the Bass Fishing Life. I'm your host, Steve Rogers. Hey, before we get into the video, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and punch the notification bell. New videos come out every Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday at noon Central Time. That way, you won't miss a thing. Thank you so much. Well, if you've been bass fishing for any length of time whatsoever, and even if you're pretty new to the sport and been browsing around on YouTube here, you've probably seen that jerk baits are brought up all the time when it comes to winter bass fishing. Now, I use jerk baits all the time, spring, summer, and fall, and I catch fish on them throughout the year. But jerk baits have really kind of almost been pigeonholed into a winter bait, especially the suspending jerk baits, and they work, they catch fish. But we're going to talk about some things today that I think are going to help you really put the odds in your favor or tip the balances in your favor when it comes to location, retrieve, rod, line, that type of stuff. Because it's not always as easy as it sounds. Just throw a jerkbait out there and you're going to catch a fish. I wish it was that easy. We know that in the wintertime, bass are sluggish. All right, they are really sluggish, and our retrieves often have to match what is going on with the metabolism of the fish. And probably the first thing that we need to talk about is that to be successful in the wintertime on jerkbaits, or I should say to be as successful as you potentially can, the bass have got to be relatively shallow. And for me, that magic line is somewhere in that 10 to 12 feet, maybe if it's a really ultra clear water down to 15 feet. But usually if it's much below that 10 or 12 foot mark, I'm using other winter fishing methods. But if the fish are in that range or shallower, a jerkbait is definitely something I'm going to have tied on and throw. Now, some of you might be thinking, holy cow, are the fish really going to be 10 foot or less in the wintertime? Well, there are days, yes, they definitely are, but certain lakes, man, they are just known to have shallow fish in the wintertime. First one that pops into my mind is Lake of the Ozarks. I have fished down there where I've got several inches of snow on the deck of my boat. The rod and the reel are icing up, and I'm throwing jerk baits, and I'm catching bass in less than 10 foot of water on some of the coldest, nastiest days. So some of it is dependent on the characteristics of the particular lakes that you fish all of the time. But let's go ahead and go over some situations where those bass may be shallower, or how we need to start looking for them so you know if a suspending jerkbait is going to be the deal on that particular day. The first thing that we need to know, okay, when we're looking for these shallower winter fish, is that a suspending jerkbait is a total and complete reaction bite. Yes, even when the water is cold, it's a reaction bite. And here's why, okay? So as that bait is suspended there, and we'll talk about suspending the bait here in a little bit, how to really make sure you got that dialed in, and that bass comes up to it, they're gonna be taking a look at it. And when that bait is just sitting there like this, they're gonna look at it, and all of a sudden you're gonna give it a twitch. Boom. That twitch is when they are going to react. It's very similar if you were standing or sitting with somebody and you kept flicking your hands right in their eyes. What does the other person's eyes do? They blink, or they put their hand up to naturally deflect it. You can't help. You react. That is what the bass are doing. So they're coming up looking at that lure, and then when it's got that sudden twitch to it, they react to it. They cannot help themselves. So even though it's winter, even though it's cold, I classify this as a reaction type of a bait. Now, what about location? Where are we going to start looking? All winter long, and then even into the first few weeks and months of spring, I always start on the north bank. This works for the entire continental United States, and you may be wondering why the north bank. Well, it's because the north side of the lake, the north bank, is getting the most direct sunlight. And when you're winter fishing, just a few degrees can make a huge, huge difference. So the first thing that I do when I get on the water and I get that boat in the water is I have already identified on my map or on my graph, pull the maps up there on the graph, and identified which north banks I think are going to have the best sun exposure. And I'm looking for the warmest water I can find. If the majority of the lake is 41, 42 degrees, and I find a nice north bank that is 44 degrees, that is where I'm starting. Now, there are several features to look for when you're idling around or walking around the pond. You're walking around a pond or lake on the north side. There's several things that I'm looking for. One, rock. I'm always looking for rock. If I can find a north bank that has rock on it, wow, for winter bass fishing, that is a great place to start. The second thing that I'm looking for is there any remaining vegetation. Some of that vegetation is still going to be alive, but a lot of it will be dead and decaying. But I'm going to try to find some vegetation. If I can combine a north bank with some rock and vegetation, now I have really narrowed things down. The third thing that I'm going to be looking for as I'm idling around or walking around the bank, the shoreline, is any sign of life whatsoever. Sometimes, depending on the depth, you may or may not see that or the clarity of the water, but that is the last factor I'm going to keep into consideration to narrow down what I think is going to be a very high percentage area. Remember, with jerkbait fishing in the wintertime, I'm looking for fish that are shallower. Usually, if you've got several days of some sunshine in the wintertime, those fish will start to come up a little bit, getting that warmer water. But if you can find that north bank with rock and vegetation and it's just a couple degrees warmer than other parts of the lake, they will be up there. I promise you there will be fish there. That is when the jerkbait's really going to shine, and you're going to want to have one on the end of your line. Now, how does the presentation go for this particular situation? When I have fished a lot of tournaments down on Lake of the Ozarks, the joke used to be go ahead and throw the bait out there, reel it down to depth, give it a twitch, then eat a sandwich, drink an entire can of Coke, then give it another twitch. Now, I know that is a super exaggeration, but basically when people say that, what they mean is you really got to leave it sit this time of year. You don't want to be ripping it like you would in the summertime or the fall and just rip, 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 pause, rip, rip, pause. It's more like a twitch, twitch, sit. Twitch, twitch, sit. You really got to let it sit in between. It's very similar when we've had the video about Ned rigging in the wintertime with dead sticking. So I can go ahead and put that link down below, but it's very similar. You put it out there, that Ned rig, if you're fishing deep, you leave it sit. Now when that bass bites it, it is going to feel like weight. Probably 99% of the bites that I get are immediately after the twitch. And unlike in the summertime or in the fall or even in the late spring where they go with it, they're going to grab it, and most of the time they're just going to hold it. It's not like it is in the warmer months where you're twitching, 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 and they'll explode onto it. It's just going to kind of load up and just feel like weight. At least that's what my experience is most of the time in winter jerkbait fishing. Now, as far as the hook set, just reel down, maintain pressure, side sweep. You don't want to go crazy on it, which is why on your jerkbaits, and most of them come this way anymore, you want to have small trebles. You don't want those real big heavy wire trebles. These small ultra sharp trebles will penetrate and then hold on. So you just want to reel down, Give it a gentle side sweep and maintain pressure. As far as a rod, I like to have a medium action and something a little bit shorter, usually less than 7 foot, because as I'm twitching it, I've got that rod tip right down there towards the water. Now, I'm not super tall, so if you're a tall guy or a tall gal, you could probably get away with a rod over 7 foot, but when I'm jerkbait fishing, I like to be around that 6'10" length on the rod that I use, and definitely a medium. I want some give in that rod. I don't want that big heavy or medium heavy strength on that thing. I want some give to it, very similar to a typical crankbait rod. So that's the type of rod that I'm going to use. As far as line, I'm either going straight fluoro or I will go braid and then with a fluoro leader. So those are the two combinations that I'm going to have. I really like the braid to fluoro leader because they do sink and it helps me keep that bait down there a little bit more. And the fluoro is just really nice and clear, and I feel I get more bites that way. Now here's something that often you won't hear a lot of people talk about as far as the suspending jerkbaits. The water density changes throughout the year. We know that colder water is more dense, warmer water, those molecules are farther apart. A jerkbait that you have tuned up to suspend the way you want it in the summertime is not going to be the same in the wintertime. The water is much more dense when it is cold. When you get your jerkbait tied on and you throw it out there and you get it down to depth, make sure that you get it close enough where you can see it and watch, is that thing bouncing up like a cork? Is it sinking? Is it rising up slowly? Is it sinking slowly? And I like to use either those suspend strips or dots and put them down in here to get it the suspending just right. I've been known to go ahead and take some really, really fine wire, the same type of wire that a florist would use for bouquets, and then wrap it around where the eye hooks into the body of the bait. So I'll put a twist or two around there. For me personally, I like the bait to either just hold there perfectly or rise up very, very slowly. Some guys like it to sink very, very slowly, but whichever way you prefer that it goes, that you have the most confidence in, it needs to be slow. You don't want to stop twitching that bait and then it just rise up like a cork, okay? That's not going to be good as far as that goes. The reason I like them to rise up just a touch is because I find that if I have the jerkbait at the eye level of the bass or just above it, I tend to get more bites than if I'm running, like if the bass are here and I'm running below them. I like the bass to be here and at the same level or just above them. Okay, so a lot of that depends on water clarity, water temperature. That's really kind of one of those X factors, but that is what I have found and prefer. Make sure in your jerkbait arsenal that you do have jerkbaits that run at different depths. Okay, this one here runs a little bit deeper than this particular one. This one runs really shallow, okay, up around that 5-6 foot mark. This one's going to be getting closer down to that 8 to 10 foot mark. And to get the maximum depth out of your presentation, you really want to make long casts with the jerkbait, so that way you can go ahead and get it down to your target depth and you haven't missed the area that you're really trying to key in on. As far as color goes, I'm always going natural. I start natural. Now this one here is one of my favorites. This is a yellow perch color. For a lot of more northern waters where yellow perch are a real important forage base, let's say like Lake Champlain, for example, I really have good luck on this particular color combination. Or I'll use a lot of yellows or darker colors if bluegill are the main forage base. But for the majority of anglers kind of in that mid belt, and then if you get farther south, they're going to go with something more a typical shad type of a pattern. But I always start out with natural colors and then I vary it depending on the day. You know, if it's bright and sunny, I'll have some more flash something like this. If it's cloudy and dark, I'll go with a little more solid colors. Well, I hope that this helps you out and you have some success this winter when you are jerkbait fishing. If you have additional questions or comments or other things that you have learned and you'd like to share it down here with our viewers, go ahead and pop it in the comments down below. I try to respond to every single comment, so thank you so much. Hey, and don't forget, go out and encourage someone today, because you never know what a difference you're going to make in their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.